about in the last slide how to find the midpoint. All right, well, here you got to read very carefully, okay, to understand what's the question asking. So it says the coordinate of point T, or at 0, 4, the midpoint of segment ST is at 4, -3. You need to find the coordinate of point S. So what happens is you have a line segment, okay? You have, it's T and then S. Now listen, this is not drawn to scale. This is not exact, okay? But this is like what it looks like, okay? So your midpoint is somewhere in the middle. And we'll call that M for midpoint. You know what T is, and you know what your midpoint is. But what you don't know is what your other endpoint is, okay? Now you need to think, all right? Think about it. What is the steps that we took in the last slide to find the midpoint? Well, we took our x's and we added them together. Then we divided by 2, okay? For our y, we did the same thing. Then we divided by 2. So the last thing that you did was divide by 2. And the step above that was you took your 2 endpoints. You took your 2 endpoint x's and added. You took your 2 y endpoints and you added, okay? Then you divided by 2. Well, here, you don't know what your 2 endpoints are, all right? You are given the answer, right, to the midpoint. You're given the answer to the midpoint. So here, you're going to have to undo the process, okay? Follow the steps that I showed you, and you should be fine. So I'm going to start with my midpoint, okay? I'm going to start with my midpoint. That was 4, and the y was -3. I like to make myself a chart. It keeps things nice, neat, and organized, okay? All right. So the last thing I did was divide by 2. So instead of dividing by 2, I'm going to multiply by 2, okay? So 4 times 2 is 8. -3 times 2, -6. The previous step I added, right? So the opposite of addition is subtraction. So I'm subtracting. Well, what are we subtracting? Well, we're subtracting the given endpoint. That's 0 and 4. Okay? So I have 8. I have -10. That is coordinate S. Okay? How do I check myself? How do I know that this is correct? Well, remember, your answer, right? Your midpoint should come out to 4, -3. So you take your 2 endpoints, T and S, add them together. So 0 plus 8, divide that by 2. 8 over 2, 4. Okay? Then you take your y's, 4 and -10. Add that together. I get -6 over 2. That gives me -3. Oh, look, that was my midpoint that I started with. So that's how I knew I did it correctly. Okay, we're going to do the same thing again. All right, same process. We want to undo the midpoint formula. How do I know that? Because it says the coordinates of point T are 4 and -18. The midpoint of ST is 4, -10. We're finding the other endpoint, okay? They gave you the midpoint. Make yourself a little chart, okay? Your x's go here. So we're starting with our answer, right? The midpoint, we're starting there. The last thing we did to find the midpoint was to divide by 2. So now we're going to multiply by 2. So that's 8. This is -20. Before we divided by 2, we added. The opposite of addition is subtraction. Okay, notice what I just did here. I wrote it down as subtraction. Why is that important? Because be careful. Watch this. when I take my endpoint T and I plug in 4, the Y is already negative. So what ends up happening is you forget to put the negative because you think it was already there because of the subtraction. No, it's a double negative right here, okay? That's a double negative because it's minus whatever the Y is, and the Y is negative 18. Watch your signs. Be careful. Big mistake can happen there. All right, so that double negative really turns into a plus, okay? Minus a negative, double negative, just like in English, cancels each other out. So I'm really doing negative 20 plus 18, which is a negative 2. And if I wanted to, I could go back like I did in the last problem, check, make sure that came out as for negative 10 on my midpoint. Okay, I'm going to do one more. Same thing, okay? Same thing here. Take my midpoint. Make my chart. 3, negative 9. Last thing I did was divide by 2. Multiply by 2. Multiply by 2. 6, negative 18. Before I divided by 2, I added my endpoints. Okay, I added my 2 endpoints. The opposite of addition is subtraction. What am I subtracting? I'm subtracting that endpoint T. So 3 minus whatever the Y is. Well, the Y is negative 15. So watch that. Be careful of that. Double negative, turn into a plus. Because that's what happens with double negatives. So I have 3 and negative 3. Okay, and that's my coordinate